Welcome back, everybody, for another exciting video. Today, we have a range report. If you've been following me lately, I've been doing a couple different load developments, a couple different methods to test, and today we're going to take a look at some of the results from those loads. We're going to start with a look at some of our 35 Remington load developments. We were trying 9.5 grains of Trail Boss with both a 125 grain and a 200 grain bullet. My first shot with a cold bore with the 125 grain 358 bullet from Lee hit up a few inches high here, and we started at 50 yards today. So I'm aiming here and we hit a little bit high. So I started to walk it down over the next few shots, and we ended up with these 5 shots here at 50 yards. And I ended up doing an extra one, so I've only got 4 right here after I had kind of dialed it in a little bit. So at 50 yards, we're looking at a little over an inch with the 125 grain bullet. And up here, you can see I was kind of working in the sighting there. And also at 50 yards with the 200 grain bullet, we were able to squeeze them all into roughly an inch, I would say. Again, that's 9.5 grains of Trail Boss, 50 yards with the 200 grain 358 Lee projectile. And I actually have some range footage, so I'm going to try and put these in the right order. I'll start with the 125 grain and then the 200 grain, and this is just me blasting at some steel at 100 yards.
Out of the black.
And also on here, these are the Trail Boss loads with Winchester primers. You can see that they're totally rounded, but they still have a little bit of that crater just around the firing pin. Nothing to worry about. You just have to know what your gun shows as pressure. And then on the end here, these are the Federal Match standard rifle. Also completely round from our 700X load. After I shot the Trail Boss loads, we moved out to 100 yards with our 8208 XBR load. Here we have 30 grains. I'm aiming right here, and as you can see, we've opened up to maybe 2 inches here. And again, that could be me being a really crappy shot. My glass is probably from the 90s, and it looks like you're staring through some Tupperware. So take that with what you will. I can work on this a little bit more because this is their starting recommended load here, so I can work up a little bit higher, I can go a little lower, and try and find an accuracy node somewhere in there as well. And here is a clip of the other 5 rounds I loaded up, hitting some steel at 100 yards.
2 inches to the left, straight left.
Here's our brass from the 8208 XBR loads. You can see our primers are totally rounded, nothing weird going on. There is a little bit of cratering, but that is on almost every piece of brass I have. It looks like that's just how the firing pin seems to strike it, and there's a little bit of flow going on there, but not because of pressure. Also at 100 yards, we loaded up 9 grains of 700X with the 200 grain bullets as well. So here's 10 shots. I'm aiming here at the center. It's a reduced load with the 200 grain bullet, so they're going to hit a little bit low. Again, take that for what you will. And here, I didn't have any extra rounds to shoot at some steel, so I was just kind of going for a 10-shot cluster to see what we could end up with. Now, a couple weeks back, I loaded up 50 rounds of 5.56 ammo with Shooter's World Precision and a 55 grain projectile. Here was 10 shots at 100 yards. Aiming here, of course, we're hitting a little bit high. but you can see we've got a nice cluster in here with a couple of them as outliers. I did not get any footage of this the other week, but that is that load at 100 yards. That's probably 2 inches for a 10-shot group. Totally acceptable for my purposes with this round, which is hitting some steel. And then last here, we've got the load of the day. This is the Lee 225 55 grain lead cast bullet with 20 grains of H335. You can see we just packed them all in here nice and tight at 100 yards. Oh, wait, just kidding. Here's, I think, 20 shots aiming at the center here. And yeah, we'll call that more of a cluster than a group. However, despite the incredible shotgun pattern we have here, here's a little footage of this hitting some steel at 100 yards.
Oh, man. I think, yeah, slow, maybe half an inch to the right.
And so you can see we're clearly hitting the torso-sized target at 100 yards, but I tried a few shots at 2, 3, and 400, and they were just all over the place. So clearly we've got some work to do here, but that's good to know that inside 100 I can load up some of these and just go blasting as much as I'd like to. Here's a look at our brass from the Lee 55 grain cast loads. Completely rounded primers. Mixed brass, which could also add to that nice shotgun cluster we had. Maybe trying matched brass might help a little bit, but I think we just need to dial in our load or try a different powder completely. And then here we have some results on our load development method without a chronograph. Here's our 8208 shots here with our 75 grain Hornady bullet. Our lowest charge is 21.8 grains. I had a little bit of the primers raising out here of the cases, but I've actually seen that from a lack of pressure. See how they're still nice and round, but we have a little bit of protrusion here, which if you don't actually know, a lack of gas will cause it to not seal properly around the primer just as it does around the bullet, and it can actually push that out a little bit instead of causing it to form completely to the pocket. And it was about 40 degrees out, so I'll have to take that into consideration as well if I want to load any more of these up. I had some of the primers raising out all the way up to here where we can finally see some flattening with our max charges here at 22.7 and 23 grains. So we can see this one is flattened out just a little bit. It's not horrible. So I'm going to probably back down to here and maybe try a 5-shot group for accuracy. On this side, we've got our Shooter's World Precision powder. Again, the same thing happened with our primers not being completely flat and starting to come out just a little bit. They're nice and round up here until we get around 24.7 and 25 grains. Again, no real pressure around the case heads from extracting or ejecting or anything. Everything else seemed fine. And again, I think this is due to a lack of pressure rather than to overpressure. So to follow up on this one, I'll go ahead and load 5 rounds here at 22.7 with the 8208 XBR and 24.7 with our Shooter's World Precision, and we'll check that out here in a couple weeks. We also did some pistol steel target shooting. They call it their tactical range. You know, it's got some of the flippy floppy targets and swingers and danglies and all the fun stuff. These are my 38 special loads. I've shot probably a couple thousand of these, and they are great. I've got 7 100X here with 4.15 grains under my Lee 358 125 here. I believe 4.2 grains is the recommended max load from Hodgdon, and these were a couple Magnum primers that barely show some flattening here. So those are Magnum primers, and then we'll take a look at these standard pistol primers. You can see how round they are. Crazy how much just a little bit different primer will make a difference like that. And finally, I did a bunch of blasting with some Barry's 9mm 115 grain and also their 147 grain projectiles. I had loaded these up with CFE pistol probably about a year ago, and the things I loaded after this, I had been getting some squibs from that powder, so I wasn't sure if it was before or after loading these, and I didn't want to pull like 300 bullets, so I went ahead and I was prepared to get a squib all day, but I ended up just blasting through all of my ammo here, which is good. I'm glad I didn't get any squibs, and now I don't have this pile of stuff loaded up that I'm just constantly questioning and have to worry about if I take someone with me. Do they know what to expect? You know, I don't want any of that stuff happening, so I took it out on my own and disposed of it properly. Well, there you have it, folks. That might have been a lot to digest at once. That might have been 2 or 3 weeks worth of load development. But there you have it. I got some tests out at 100 range. You guys were asking for some paper at a further distance, so I was trying to get that there for you. And I tried to throw in some footage. It was just taken off my phone, resting there on the bench. So it might not be the best, but it's something. With all that being said, thanks for joining me today, guys. We will see you in the next video. Have a good one.